You're watching the medieval broadcasting station, MBS.
Tonight, a failure in the Middle East, the continued spread of the Black Plague, and a growing divide between the Pope in Rome and the Patriarchs of the East. Also, an inside scoop on the Magna Carta with King John of England. We've also got accurate weather and sports from the entire team at Nightly News. Good evening, I'm Stephen Ventura. We have more news from a 3-year-long developing story. After the success that was the Third Crusade against the Islamic empires in the Holy Land, it comes as a surprise to many how much of a failure this crusade has been. As most of the Christian world knows, Pope Innocent II had recently called for another crusade. 3 years ago, a group of French knights took their vows before they embarked. The Pope and the Doge of Venice, Enrico Dandolo, made a treaty for the help of Venice with the transport to the Middle East. Last year, when it became clear that they had a lack of resources and men, some of the forces decided to seize the port of Zara from the King of Hungary, who was also under crusade vows. In response, Innocent III excommunicated the Venetians and forbade them to attack Byzantium. Now the Crusaders have captured Constantinople after a year-long siege and put a Westerner on the throne of the empire, the first Westerner since the fall of Rome. This crisis is putting a strain on an already strained relationship between the Roman Pope and the Byzantine Patriarchs. That brings us into our second story, the Great Schism. After a long line of misdeeds and misunderstandings between Rome and Constantinople, Pope Leo IX and Patriarch Michael Cerularius have excommunicated each other. This seems to cut the last thread of hope for the reconciliation of the two branches. The Eastern Church will not recognize the superiority of the Pope, and the Roman Catholic Church has decided not to recognize the other patriarchs as his equals. Along with that major political issue, there are minor religious ones, including a disagreement about the Holy Eucharist and the Filioque. There is little evidence that the two churches will mend the divide, but for now, Christians around the world wait to see how events will turn out. We have one more story to cover tonight, but first let's get to weather with guy who looks in the sky, Sean Scarfile.
Hi, I'm Sean Scarfile. This is your weekly weather report. Tonight we're seeing cloudy skies with a low temperature of 46 degrees. There's a chance of rain, so watch out if you have plans outside. For tomorrow, there's rain in the forecast in the morning, which should clear out to be a fairly sunny afternoon with a high temperature of 57 degrees. Tomorrow night should be clear skies with a low temperature of 43. Monday is looking to be sunny with a high of 60 and a low of 51. For Tuesday, a cold front moves in and it starts a multiple day-long rain event. Rain starts in the morning and continues all day long with a high of 53 and a low of 41. The rain continues through Wednesday and it gets colder with highs of up to 50 and lows down to 38. By Thursday morning, the cold front will have moved through and temperatures should be back to normal. Sunny skies are expected on Thursday with the high at 58 and a low of 45. And finally on Friday, partly cloudy skies with a high of 61 degrees and a low of 54. That's it for your weekly weather forecast. Now back to our sports broadcaster, Nick Briggs.
Good evening, I'm Nick Briggs and welcome to your nightly sports recap. What a great day today in the world of sporting events. First, here are all your final scores for the Nobles 10-man golfing tournament held at St. Andrews. In 10th, Tom finished with a 7-over. Ouch, he'll be sleeping with the rats. In 9th, Knight James finished with a 4-over. In 8th, Baron Philip finished with a 2-over. 1 over for Baron David to put him in 7th. 6th was Gabe, he shot even. And here's your top 5. 5th, we have Count Jamie, he was 1 under. And tied for 3rd, we have Duke Charles and Duke Todd, both at 3 under. In 2nd, we have Prince Harold at 4 under. And finally in 1st, funny how this turns out, is King George at 7 under. Meanwhile, on the jousting side of entertainment, number 1 seed Franklin Arthur IV was upset by number 12 seed and younger brother James Arthur. As the tournament of 12 men eventually winded down, last ranked night, James Arthur was proving that he had been vastly underestimated. He had eventually made it to the tournament final where he faced his older brother Franklin. Franklin is known across the civilization as the greatest jouster. However, since going their separate ways a few years ago, their relationship has been nothing but heated. As the joust began, James hurled his lance immediately as the horns were blown, piercing directly through the armor of brother Franklin and ending the match in a record time. The crowd was in utter disbelief. There have been several pedestrian riots since the ending, as they want to see James buried alive for eliminating their hero. This is the latest here at Nightly Sports Recap. Maybe we will see you next time if you don't catch the plague, smallpox, tuberculosis, etc.
This portion, the news, is brought to you by the Knights Templar, providing quality banking services for Crusaders since 1119.
The first recorded case of the Black Death in England was uncovered last night in London. As many of you know, the Black Death, also known as the Blue Sickness, the Great Mortality, or the pestilence in some areas, is a highly contagious disease that can kill in as little as 3 days. Nightly News medical analysts strongly encourage you to stay inside as much as possible to avoid contact with anyone, as the disease infects nearly everyone who is exposed. It kills about 72% of everyone it infects and leaves terrible damage to those who survive. Here are the signs to look for. Buboes, or swollen lymph nodes. They're situated in the armpit or neck, about the size of a chicken egg, and they're tender and warm to the touch. Other signs and symptoms may include a sudden onset of fever and chills, headache, fatigue, and muscle aches. Please be cautious when in open areas because it is not known how the disease spreads. So we have King John here today to have an interview about the Magna Carta, which was recently signed. So thanks for being on the show.
Thanks very much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
If you don't mind, let's get right into our questions.
No problem.
You've just signed a document called the Magna Carta. It was presented to you by your vassals, barons from all of England, after they took London in rebellion. Can you explain what exactly was in that document?
Basically, it limits my powers as King of England and grants more rights and liberties to my barons. I was unwilling to sign it at first when I had said, "Are the barons of England removing from the throne a king who is under the protection of the Apostolic See? By St. Peter, we cannot pass over this insult without punishing it." But reluctantly, I decided to sign it after viewing it in a different light.
The barons have stated they brought forth these complaints to you before raising an army. Why didn't you allow them to do their feudal jobs to advise you?
Obviously, I would not like to cede my royal powers. Who would? I view the Magna Carta as just a bargaining chip, a mere way to solve further action by the rebels. By signing the Great Charter, as it translates from Latin, the rebels agreed to move out of London. Although this is technically a loss for the rebels, they believe that they have just won a major battle. I shall let them have their fun.
What does this Conference of Advisors, which is being called a parliament, mean for England?
Parliament is to be made up of 25 barons who can check the power of the king. This ensures that I follow through with what I say as King of England. Also, should I disregard Parliament, they would protect the rebels and their rights. Also, there's the demand that I fire mercenaries that I use so often during recent wars, as they pledge no allegiance to England.
Speaking of these recent wars, how can you justify consistently raising taxes on lesser lords and even the church to pay for an unpopular and expensive war?
Well, the war was basically to take back our ancestral lands. Look at it as a pride thing. What would strengthen nationalism and allegiance to England more than taking back our roots as a country? But there has to be a monetary source for a definite victory.
That concludes our questions for today.
Well, Mr. Ventura, I really appreciate you having me on the show tonight. I hope the people of England are more informed on what's happening right now and what may happen in the future for our government.
Thank you for joining our show. It was great to have you, Your Royal Highness. That concludes our broadcast for tonight. Thanks for stopping by Nightly News. Stay classy, London.